mitzvah through ASMR. Good evening, Shabbat Shalom, Hag Sameach, Happy Passover. Passover begins this week, and I thought it would be nice to go through the entire Passover Seder ceremony together. So if this is your first time going through a Seder, I hope you enjoy it and find it interesting. And if you are celebrating Passover alone this year, I hope this can bring you comfort. And so before I go into the Passover Seder, I want to show you a few items we will be using. And so a very important item that we use for Passover is a Seder plate. It is kind of the center of the Seder table. And this is a new Seder plate that I have. You can see it says in Hebrew, Pesach, which is Passover in Hebrew. And these little indentations are cups built into the plate for different ritual items. They are in Hebrew and in English. So you can see this is Zeroa, which is a shank bone, usually lamb, but you can use chicken. Then we have Beitzah, which means egg. Maror, which means bitter, and you usually use horseradish. Karpas, which is parsley. Haroset, which doesn't have an English translation. I'll show you what that looks like. It's a mixture of apples and nuts and cinnamon. And then hatzeret, which is lettuce. And so this is the plate that you would be using for a Seder. And so Seder means order, and so during a Passover Seder, there's an order to how you do all the rituals. I printed out this cheat sheet from PJ Library. It was free on their website, and it was really a helpful guide because this is the first time I am hosting a Seder. And another important item is the Passover Haggadah. It is a guide to the Seder. This one is from the Jewish Federations of North America. It was also free, and it has all of the blessings you're supposed to say in order. They have them in English, in Hebrew, and also the phonetic pronunciations of Hebrew, which I usually use because I can't read Hebrew very quickly. And so this Haggadah and the guide from PJ Library are what I am going to use tonight to go through the Passover Seder with you. I think this is a nice, helpful guide, and there's plenty out there, many different resources you can find. And so before we start the Seder, here are the items in the plate. So you have the shank bone, which I used a chicken bone instead of a lamb bone. And so the egg and the shank bone both represent offerings that were made during times of the temple, and that's why we include them. The horseradish and the lettuce are supposed to both represent bitterness. They represent the bitterness of slavery and the experience the Jews had in Egypt. Haroset is supposed to look like brick and mortar, so it represents the Jews that were building while they were slaves in Egypt. And then the parsley, I have heard the parsley itself can represent the coming of spring, but you also dip it in salt water, and the salt water represents the tears and sweat of the Jews when they were in Egypt working. And so these are all of the items that go on a Seder plate and what they represent. Now we'll begin with the actual Seder. So a Passover Seder always begins by lighting Shabbat candles. So here are my Shabbat candlesticks with candles, and I have a new matchbox that I think is very pretty. And so I will be lighting the matches and the candles, and then I will be saying a blessing. And so I am using the Haggadah to find that blessing. And these candles, the flames always go down at first, but then they quickly rise back up, as you can see here. There we go, they're coming back up now. So I'm opening the Haggadah, and I will then wave my hand over the candles 3 times, and I'll say the blessing, which is Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel yom tov. And now, just to make the Seder plate and table look nicer, I'm just adding these flowers around the Seder plate. It's not necessary, it's just something I added to make it look a little bit nicer. And so the next step of the Seder after lighting the candles is to pour a glass of wine and say a prayer over it. In this case, you can also use grape juice, and that's what I decided to do. So we will say a prayer over the grape juice instead. And so we say, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam borei pri hagafen. And next we are supposed to wash our hands. Some people own a wash cup specifically for this ritual, but you don't have to have a fancy cup. You can really use any cup, and so I'm using one of my favorite small mason jars. And so you will just pour water over your hands into another bowl. You can have someone else pour the water for you, but I'm just doing this for myself. And for this first time that we wash our hands, we don't say a prayer, but we will do it a second time and say a blessing at that time. And so then we have to dip the parsley into the salt water, and there is a blessing that we say for that. It's Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam borei pri ha'adamah. And then we have to have 3 pieces of matzah out, and you take the middle piece of matzah and you're supposed to break it in half. And so the first half will, one half will go back into the center, and then this second piece will become the afikomen, which is a piece that you hide somewhere in the home, and later after the Seder meal, before dessert, children will go looking for it. And so then we have to ask 4 questions that are related to Passover. And so the 4 questions are, on all other nights, we eat either bread or matzah. On this night, why only matzah? On all other nights, we eat herbs and vegetables of any kind. On this night, why bitter herbs? On all other nights, we do not dip, even once. On this night, why do we dip twice? On all other nights, we eat our meals in any manner. On this night, why do we sit around the table together in a reclining position? And so the answer to these questions is because it is Passover, and we are commemorating the time that our ancestors were in Egypt, and then they were freed. And so by telling the story over and over again every year, we are honoring that memory, and we are celebrating the freedoms that we have. And now that we've asked the 4 questions, it's time to meet the 4 children. There are 4 children. They represent the different types of children who may be at the Passover Seder, and they may be curious and have questions. So each type of child will ask a question in a certain way, and This will tell you how to answer each child. And so, the wise child may ask, what are the rules and customs of Passover? And you can explain the Seder rules and the customs and food and say that it is to remember our history. Then the rebellious child might ask, what does this mean to you? And you can say that Jews in Egypt chose to go free together, and if you didn't choose, you'd have been stuck there, so we tell the story of choosing freedom. The simple child might just ask, what is going on? And you can say, Jews left slavery through miracles, and we celebrate and are grateful. And then you might have the quiet child who cannot ask at all. And without asking, you can still explain that we're celebrating being free, and you can invite the child to watch and listen. And then we're supposed to tell the story of Passover. This is called the Magid, and I'm just going to briefly explain that the story is about how Moses helped free the Jews from Egypt through a series of miracles. And so then we are supposed to recite the 10 plagues, and so you'll need your plate, and you'll need the Kiddush cup with wine, or any cup with wine or grape juice, and you'll dip your finger into the juice or wine, and you'll dab a dot, and you'll do this 10 times, one for each different plague. And so we are going to go through the 10 plagues together. And so the first plague is blood. The second plague is frogs. The third plague is vermin. The fourth plague is beasts. The fifth plague is cattle disease. The sixth plague is boils. The seventh plague is hail. The eighth plague is locusts. The ninth plague is darkness. And the 10th plague is the slaying of the firstborn. And so there we have a representation of all 10 plagues. And then we're supposed to drink another cup of wine, and so we say another blessing. So I'll say, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri hagafen. And that is the second time that we drink the wine and say the prayer. And then we're supposed to wash our hands again. So I have my wash cup back. And this time we do recite a prayer, a blessing, and that goes, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al nitilat yadayim. And so that's the prayer that you say. And then we're supposed to do a blessing over the matzah. And so we say, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al achilat matzah. And then we take a piece of the matzah and we eat it. And then we're also supposed to take the bitter maror and eat that as well. So we have the horseradish and we say, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al ahilat maror. And we take a bite to taste the bitterness. And then finally, we have to make a Hillel sandwich. Hillel was a wise sage during the time of the Second Temple, and he made it a tradition to break matzah in half and put some haroset in between the pieces of matzah and make a little sandwich, and you take a bite. And so I'm adding some of the haroset now. Sometimes you can also add the lettuce, so you're getting a bit of bitterness and sweetness into the sandwich. And so there's my sandwich, and you're supposed to take a bite, which I'll do now. And there it is. It doesn't taste too bad because the haroset is pretty sweet. And so that's pretty much the entire Seder. You will eat a meal and then look for the afikomen and then have dessert. So that's pretty much it. There might be some other traditions. One thing that you're supposed to do after the meal is have a third cup of wine. And so over the third cup we say, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam borei pri hagafen. And so you're supposed to have a fourth cup that you don't drink from, but you leave out for the prophet Elijah. You're also supposed to open the door to welcome Elijah in, and over Elijah's cup you will say, Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hatshibi, Eliyahu Hagliadi, Bimhera Yavo Elenu Im Mashiach Ben David. And so that's what you say over the cup for Elijah. And that's pretty much the whole Seder after that. But like I said, everyone might have a slightly different way of doing it, but the order should be similar. And so I hope that you enjoyed this run through the Passover Seder. If you enjoyed this video, please like and comment below, and please subscribe to my channel. And as always, Toda Rabah, Laila Tov, thank you very much, and have a good night, have a good Passover. Bye.